Alright, so I'll show off how you can use the library in your own client application or your own consumer of it. So first off, I'll just write a very simple script, but I'll need the actual package um, added to my npm project. So first step is installing it, in this case with Yarn, which also works with npm. And so it's actually quite simple to use the library. You just import the privacy API class from the package, and then you instantiate an instance of the class with your API key, which I'll pass in an environment variable. And then you can start making calls, which I'll do in an asynchronous function, which I'll call, and this will be the script. So first what we're going to do is create a card on the API, and this is pretty simple to do. All of the methods are listed here in the instance of the class privacy API. So if I want to create a card, I'll go here, create card, and I can hover to see the response type. So it's a promise, which returns a response, which returns a card, or basically a promise typed response typed card. So from that I can infer that my response type will be a card response if I await the call. And here it says that it can take parameters, and actually the parameters are required because there's no question mark. So I'll create a new object, and then I'll ask which properties do I need. So here we can see type has no question mark, which means it's required. Funding token is optional, 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 optional. Okay, so I'll put type in, and then it's a string. Actually type, let's see what the IntelliSense says. It is a card type, which isn't immediately obvious what it is, but it's actually one of these strings. So we'll have an unlocked card, which we'll create. So now I have a card response object, and let's see what type of fields are available. Okay, so here we can see that all these fields are actually Axios response properties. So the data here is what the generic type refers to. So if I want the actual response from the API, I access that with data. And then I have even more IntelliSense that tells me what type of properties are available on a card object. So now I know how to access, for example, the token of the card, which is used in the next call to list the transactions made by the card. So I'll create a new request, which will be privacy API.list transactions. And then here I have optional params. Since I just want to list a few transactions for a specific card, I'll pass in a card token. And then this will be card response.data.token. Then I'll set that to a new variable, list transactions response equals await. And then I can look at what the response looks like. So this again has the Axios properties, and in data it has another data field because that's how the API returns it. Page, total entries, total pages. So this is a paginated sort of response. But the only thing I want to do really is to log the response. So I'm going to do just that. Console.log list transactions response.data. just so we can see what the response looks like. And finally, I want to make an invalid call, just to display what the actual way to write these functions is. So in a production scenario, you'd wrap this these asynchronous calls in try catch, so that when there's an error, your process is an exit. So try catch, right? So here, in a TypeScript file, I would be able to type this and have better IntelliSense, but since this is JavaScript, I'll just have to know that this is an Axios response, which typically what you do in JS, you console.log the error, and then you can see which properties are relevant to your error, and then sort of console.log different stuff. But I know that the error code will be listed in error.response.code, and that message will be e.response.data. And I'll just log both of those. Right, so if any of these requests fails, it'll trigger this catch block, and it'll log the code and the message of the error. So now I'm just going to go ahead and run this once, just to show what happens with technically no invalid calls. Alright, so the console logged string or object is data page total entries total pages, which is actually this statement here. So the catch block was not triggered because both of these calls succeeded. So what I'm going to do is create an invalid call, and this will be await privacy API dot, let's say, add bank, and this expects an account number, which I'll provide like this, which should be invalid, and a routing number, which should also be invalid in this format. And then here, just to remove the unused variable, I'll log this, but this will probably never be triggered because this call here will throw an error, which will be caught here. So let's run this again, and we should see the same logged statement, but also these two properties logged. All right, so response status code is undefined. That's because I made a mistake here. It should be .status, but we see that the message was passed. So the response status code was 402, and the message has a debugging request ID and an actual message, which is missing routing number. So here I could say, okay, routing number 123454321, run it again, missing account number. So this error changed because I now have a valid routing number. So this should be 1234321, and then boom. We now have a valid call. Here, of course, we're logging something ugly, so we'll just .data data. There we go. Cool. So now we have a card with no account name, and these are the types, last four. So we've successfully debugged a failing call with the error messages returned by the actual HTTP request, and all of that was exposed through the library, which leverages Axios. Axios is a response format to make developing type inference and suggestions easier on the developer. So that's basically everything that there was to show. I tried to make this library as simple and intuitive as possible, and I think this is demonstrated here that you can easily write and debug code using this library and successfully make API calls to the privacy.com API.